Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Secret Origins of Mint Condition. And this is the third annual Spooktacular Halloween edition, or at least part one of the Halloween edition.
Yeah, I was going to say, you make it sound like it's the only Halloween episode. We always have more than one.
We always have more than one, and this is part of our Halloween programming this year. So if everything has worked out correctly, you've already entered the swamp with Swamp Thing, and now we are here. With Chris is joining us.
Hey, y'all.
And also joining me is Joe.
Hey, folks. How you doing?
And, of course, joining us for our Halloween episode is the person we went down to the crypt earlier and unchained the door. And we pried the bar and the nails off of the coffin. And joining us is Mint Condition's own king of Halloween, Patrick Louie, my brother, is here.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Patrick. How you doing?
So last year, Patrick joined us and whomped us by inviting Pennywise the Clown to Mint Condition Stadium.
I still think the judges were bribed. I'm just saying.
I agree with Chris.
I think looking back, that might have been a slightly unfair fight.
It was well argued. I enjoyed the fight, but it was definitely a whomping.
Yeah, Dracula folded like a $2 suitcase.
Yes. So Patrick won, and we had Monster Stadium going, and we thought about doing Monster Stadium again this year, but because someone who shall remain nameless, Chris, invited a xenomorph into the ring, and we have not been able to clean all the xenomorphs out of the.
I just want to say that instead of age mellowing you, I think age has made you bitter, James. There's a time you would not have called me out when you said you wouldn't. You were once a man of honor and a man of your word, but I think you've grown bitter in your old age.
That's possible. It's possible. It's possible. The Wolfman last year got killed by Pennywise the Clown, so it was a tough defeat. We've decided, and actually Chris came up with this great idea to talk about haunted houses, which if Mint Condition, the podcast is always in continuity. So if you want to know more about Patrick's history with haunted houses, you can go back to our first Halloween.
It was really good. Go back and listen. There's some really fun stuff in there.
Yes, there's some great stuff in there. So Chris, why don't you tell us more about your thoughts about the haunted house idea for this episode?
Sure. Yeah. So, it's always been a pleasure having Patrick, having you on the show for the Halloween episodes. And I think you've brought out a lot of good creativity in us.
Thank you.
Which is fun. Like when we first started the show, we did a lot of top 10 lists. Don't get me wrong, they were fun and we got really creative with some of the content, but I feel like with the monster fights and stuff, we've reached tapped a different level of creativity. So I was thinking about that, and how do we admittedly you have several wheelhouses of which I'm aware. I'm sure you've got more, but part of me was thinking, like, how do we tap into your wheelhouse? And I thought about haunted houses, and I thought it might be fun to discuss how we would, well, really focusing on you, Patrick, and then the rest of us sort of maybe sharing some ideas, but mostly asking you questions. You have so much experience with haunted houses, so like you have an unlimited budget. You can do what you want to do. The lawyers will write up whatever kind of waiver you want them to write up. How would you design your ideal haunted house?
Oh, man. That's like it's opening a whole can of worms, man.
Exactly. Putting the onus on the guest. That's all we know how to do.
Every person, as far as I'm aware, every person who's worked in a haunted house, it is their fantasy. They always talk about like their dream haunted house, like what they would do differently, and like just like you proposed, like if there was no budget and you could do whatever you wanted, what would you do? I think everyone's got a whole list of like pipe dream ideas, and
well, here,
I'll say this.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that, like, this is not for everyone. I'll say this right off the gate. My favorite type of haunted house that I got to do, and it was in like my final years of haunting, were full contact haunted houses. And I know it like freaks a lot of people out. A lot of people don't like to be touched, but
sure,
for the actors, it's a freaking blast. Like, you don't get. There's only so many kinds of scares you can get by just jumping out and like acting creepy. But like when you can actually touch someone, it changes everything.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So I think an idea that I've talked about with like some of my friends would be to do. One idea was like a kind of a haunted house that I've never really seen before, and it would rely almost entirely on at least the soundtrack wise, on its ambient noise. So there's no soundtrack. There's no like lightning going off. There's no creaking doors. It's literally just the sound of the environment that you're in that's naturally creating. And so it'll rely entirely on, the set decoration and the actors to really amplify it. And I think there's something to that though, because imagine walking in expecting crazy sound effects and lights blaring and like strobes, but it's just walking into a normal house. And I think that would really throw people off and catch them off guard and get some really unique scares out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would be unsettled by that. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely work with me. Yeah.
But I think that would be extremely difficult to pull off. But I think, not more realistically, but I've also had other ideas about, man, if it were possible and the insurance wasn't like through the roof, to do an underwater haunt where, you walk out to the end of a dock and, that's where the queue line is. And there's a guy obviously like reads you the rules and whatever. And you press a button and you just see like the water start to like bubble up. And all of a sudden, like a door like rises up out of the water, and then the group of people gets into it, and then it resubmerges under the water, and everyone else who's waiting in line has no idea where they're going.
Wow! Wow! I love that idea. That sounds amazing.
Like, I don't know if it's like in a submarine or like an underwater city, but like something where not only are you actually in the maze, but you are truly trapped underwater. Like the idea that like there is no way out except to continue forward through the maze.
Right.
And especially for those people who like immediately book it and start running, there's nowhere to go. You have to
underwater. No one can hear you scream.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing. Stuff like that. Like something that even when the actor potentially quote unquote fails, the environment will make up for whatever that person is lacking, whatever like the moment fails to do. Like the fact that you're there underwater with these monsters is like enough to freak people out.
No, for sure. I think you could even take some also like actor failure type stuff and turn it to your advantage, right? Like there's this horrifying thing where like they're now underwater and then and it's like, wow, that's so impressive. This is so weird and creepy. And then like the first actor or two are not that scary. And it's like, all right, well, this is disappointing. Maybe they were like over reliant on the space itself. And then the third actor who comes along, who's not very good, gets eaten by another actor. And suddenly it actually does turn.
Oh God.
Like, it's like, oh no, these actors were bad on purpose, and now we're seeing all the good and horrifying acting, but just keeping people off balance.
Oh, 100%. And we've done things like that previously in the haunt, where we've tried to throw in like red herrings to like really throw people off. Yeah, I remember one year, I forget who proposed the idea. I think it was another one of the actors, but they were like, what if we put a fake actor break room in the middle of the haunt? And they were like, well, what would happen? It's like, well, you'd be walking through the maze getting scared, and you'd enter a room, and it would look like it would look like a dressing room. There's like makeup on the tables, and there's like a TV, and there's like snacks everywhere. And then you walk in, and the guy is just sitting there. He's like, oh, sorry, you must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. This is the break room. You got to go that way. And then they go that way, and a guy just jumps out of a fake wall with a chainsaw, and they get freaked out.
Oh my God, I love that.
And it worked perfectly. It got everyone every single time. And some people refused to believe that they were supposed to continue through the break. And like, and they just went back the other way and went backwards through the haunt, and then which also worked great. But what was I going to say? Yeah, like, honestly, just the idea of talking about like dream haunted houses, like my mind is like fucking like firing on.
No, I love that, and I know it's a big ask too. Like part of where this idea came from is that for years I've said that I think people would pay to stay in a haunted hotel, but basically like a scare house. Basically, right. Fill out like what level of comfort touch you're comfortable with, that sort of thing, like between what hours do you not want to be scared, like what space is not okay. But like and again, like I have this idea and I'm like, all right, so now all I need are like some engineers, I need lawyers, I need backers, and then they just need to make it all happen and then pay me for my idea. So it sounds easy, but it was things like using the technology that when you're in the shower, the walls start bleeding.
Right. Yeah.
Like you see, if you have a balcony, for example, you see somebody outside walking on the balcony. My idea for that kind of thing, again, depending on like how extensively people are willing to be scared, how many waivers they're willing to sign. The first like couple of nights, it's kind of fun, but like you open the doors and there's nobody there because it's like, okay, it's a screen thing, right? It's a projection thing. But that third night, there's actually an actor out on the balcony. Like that kind of stuff that I think would be like, yeah, it's not for most people. Like you say about, touch haunted houses, but for some people, that's amazing.
It's funny you mentioned the balcony idea because that reminds me, we had, and this is like another, again, one of those pipe dream ideas that there's no way any haunt could afford the insurance on this. But so imagine like a 2-story haunt. And I'm pretty sure this is an idea that my friend Damien, I kind of was like the creative genius on. But so imagine a 2-story haunt, you're on the second floor, and where you would normally see, say, like a bunch of like giant, factory style windows, there's, guests wouldn't really be able to see this, but there is like a big mesh net on that side of the wall. So there's the hallway, there's the net on like your right or left, and then beyond that is just a drop down to the first floor. So the idea is that, when guests aren't paying attention, they walk, in front of that net, and an actor comes from the opposing side and basically comes and scares you and pushes you out towards the net.
Oh my
and you
God, that's terrifying.
You think you're going to fall, but the net catches you, and then you end up back down on the first floor in a different section of the haunt, separated from your group.
Oh my God, I love that.
Now, like, you're... Now
Do
you're on your own.
Do you sign a waiver that clears you of assault and battery? Because at some point I would be frightened, but at some point I'm just going to clock somebody if they do that to me.
It's funny. They always say in haunted houses, it's like the 3-foot rule. You never want to get closer than 3 feet from a guest because that's like basically striking distance.
Right.
Yeah.
So any actor that does that, you're on your own.
I think you talked about that actually, when you were talking about your experience in work.
Yeah, I remember.
I think we talked about that.
Yeah. I've been hit a few times, and it's never been. I mean, I know people who have been hit intentionally, and that's always messed up. But anytime it's happened, I've always known that it was my fault. I put myself in that position. But it has allowed for some like really cool, cool like almost like action movie style moments where like the person gets freaked out and kicks me in the face, but because I'm wearing a protective mask, my head just gets whipped back, and I just turn back at them, and they're like, "Oh shit!"
It's cool.
So
there's other ideas.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, you first.
I was just going to say, sort of along those lines, and I know this is partially a conversation we've had before regarding horror movies as well as scare haunts. But if in your ideal haunted house, how much are we talking practical effects versus special effects? Like, I mean, I'm assuming that you're using both, but is there like a certain balance or ratio that you want to make sure you strike? Have you given that any thought?
I think it's the same thing in movies where you don't want to have more of one and less of the other. Like you want to have you want them to basically work together. You want one to benefit the other and vice versa. I don't like haunted houses that rely too heavily on special effects and electronics. I would much rather there be a real person in front of you because one, the interactions are always different. So if you go more than once, it's always going to be a different experience. Because Bayville Screen Park, not to, crap on them too much, but, they didn't do a lot of changes over the years, and you go enough and you can remember, like, there's an electronic there, something's going to pop out over there, that's a hiding spot. Like, it's got to be an even balance of the two. But if I had to pick, I'd rather have more actors than props, electronic props and stuff like that.
Well, that's an interesting, something I want to jump on, Patrick, with all the work that you do. What's obviously this is like done through the nights of Halloween, and usually they're done every night. So what's the most amount of time or most elaborate makeup that you would do at a haunted house for an actor to like have to get made up and be
it depends on the haunt. and obviously all depends on budget. Typical haunted houses, ones that are just basically open from, let's say, 8:30 or 7 o'clock to midnight. They're however many people show up that buy tickets, they get to go through. There's just not enough time to do really elaborate makeups because they're going to get beaten up. People are going to start sweating. Makeup's going to start falling off. It doesn't pay to invest in that. But if it's a haunt where it's, there only so many people can show up, it's very timed slots for groups to go in. Those are the ones that are allotted the time to, come up with like literally full creature suits, full makeups and stuff like that. There's a haunt that my friend is working on that opens up in the city this year, where there's full creature suits from head to toe costumes, being built for the actors. So it really depends on the type of haunt that you're trying to do. There's usually just not enough time, and it's just not usually worth it, for the haunt to invest that kind of money in it. Yeah,
because you're almost like making a movie
you're
at
talking
that point.
about running foam latex prosthetics and whatnot, and those things just won't survive your standard haunted house. I mean, people do it, but it's usually not. It's usually the actor will do that to themselves and handle it on their own time and money, but the haunt itself usually won't invest in it. It'll usually be like costumes and masks, things that can easily be slipped on and taken off at the end of the night.
How big is the team that you would put together? Like, you have so much haunt experience. Like, how many people do you think you would need to help, actors aside? I'm thinking more like people who throw around ideas and then build the actual thing and all that stuff. What kind of a team are you putting together to build your haunted house?
Well, so, well, okay, so we'll go with like say like the underwater idea. I mean, aside from like the engineers needed to build it, I think for makeup and costumes, I probably would want a crew of anywhere from like 8 to 10 people, working on sculpting, molding, casting, applying the makeups, and then doing like touch-ups here and there throughout the night, that kind of thing. Because we're talking unlimited budget. I mean, it could even be more than that, but you really need like a solid crew of people to constantly be running these these prosthetics and makeups, to get them in and out, so that they're ready for the crowds and whatnot.
Patrick, what locations would you scout for your ultimate haunted house?
What locations?
Yeah, I mean, something on a hill or something, in a valley or in a dark forest.
That's really interesting. It's funny. Me and my friends, we've always wanted to do like a crashed alien spaceship as a haunted house.
Ooh.
And I think that would be a really great location for like almost like a valley or even like maybe a desert type location where, it's lots of open space, room for like, if there's not just actors inside the building, there's actors outside near the queue line that can really chase people through the desert if they really wanted to, like that kind of room to kind of like just do whatever you want. And there's not really any danger of anyone being hurt. Obviously, the haunted house, the spaceship one is one where like, we always wanted to model it after the Nostromo from Alien.
Oh, sure.
Very narrow hallways. Really strengthen the idea that you're trapped in here and you're being hunted, kind of thing. You have no idea where the actor's going to pop out of, and literally. I mean, there's another thing I've never seen a haunt do before, but to have multiple pathways that people can take, one group could go down this hallway and cut left, and the other group can be like, oh, I wonder if I can go through that vent, and they pop the vent, and then they can go through the vents.
Oh, that's so cool.
Like literally everything. And, even, just like an Alien to, hook up the guests with, motion trackers and stuff like that are hooked up to the actors so they can kind of, every once in a while when they start to get too close, it's kind of like a proximity thing.
Yeah.
Or once you start to get close to an actor, their blip will start to pop up on your radar, and you can kind of see when they're getting closer and closer and closer to you. And if done right, you can, just like in the movie, you can kind of like hide them until it's too late for them to get away, kind of thing.
Is there? Do you know, Patrick? Is there anything like that where it's a special effect but deployed a certain way, like the for example, in this case it actually is a tracker, but let's say that they're told they're getting trackers, and they just get a machine that a little device that basically can remotely be, blip 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 blip, blip and then nothing happens, just
Right.
to freak them out a little bit. Do you know of anything like that?
I've never heard anything specifically like that. I mean, I wouldn't be entirely shocked if someone has maybe utilized something like that. I had heard rumors a long time ago about a what was it a haunted house that someone was working on where you went in with a heartbeat sensor attached to you, and the if you could stay calm, keep your heartbeat down to a base level, you could get through without too much intensity. But the more your heart rate went up, the more intense the haunt got. So if the more and more freaked out, the more fucked up stuff is going to start happening to you inside the haunted house. Right? So if you're like
sadistic,
just a horde of monsters like chasing you down the hallway and like banging on the walls and like
let me out of here! Be screaming.
Yeah, to be able to pull off something like that would be just stunning. Like to experience it even would just be on another level.
I mean, some of the stuff you're describing, Patrick, is like I wonder if this niche market exists. Like you're describing like high-end haunted houses. Like you're making haunted houses for a select few people.
Yeah,
who can afford
I think
to do
there
them.
is if it's marketed right, people I think will pay high ticket prices. I mean, it would have to be very, very expensive. Like you're talking like maybe even as high as like a $175, $200, but like for a truly unique experience, something that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Right.
And there are haunts that try to do stuff like that, but they tend to go too violent, too at that point, like where people are like, literally, like there's a haunted house called like McCain. I say haunted house in quotations.
Right.
It's more it's McCamey Manor, and they basically torture like waterboarding, force them to eat gross stuff, tying them up.
That's
and like,
so weird.
It's not a haunted house. And if anything, a lot of people I think in the haunt industry do not like that guy because he puts he gives the industry a bad name because people think like, oh, I don't want that to happen to me. I'm not going to go to a haunted house, but like they're not all like
Right.
that.
Well, because it seems to me, and anybody feel free to jump in if you disagree or anything, but it seems to me like what we're talking about here is that if you have an infinite budget, you're still maintaining the spirit of the other haunts. It's just you're finding more technically sophisticated ways to express those things or share experiences that otherwise wouldn't happen, but are just magnified experiences that the good haunts already do, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's ideas. I usually have a lot of like snippets of scares that I would want to do versus an entire haunt like planned out in my head.
Sure.
I don't know if any of you guys have played Resident Evil at all.
I have, yeah. I played
so
0 through 4.
I think. Did you play is the guy in the trench coat in all of them? Is he in the original, or is that just the remake?
I honestly don't remember. I think it might just be no. He's in 2, isn't he?
Yeah, I didn't know if he was in the original game or if he was like an added.
No, I don't think he's in the original Resident Evil. I think he's in Resident Evil. He starts in Resident Evil 2, I think.
Right. So, but like the concept is he's constantly following you, and you can kind of get away from him, but you always like when he starts to get closer, you hear like the thump of his feet getting louder and louder as he gets closer and closer to you. I've always had this idea of like you're somewhat, I guess, being lied to about what this haunted house really is. So like you kind of go in and it's almost like you're urban exploring in a quote unquote haunted house, and like at a certain point, like say like you're up on the second floor and you hit a mark, and that cues this actor who's either genuinely a giant of a man. I mean, I'm talking like 7-foot tall dude, or a dude who's like on stilts, but you hear like a loud bang, and you go back out to like the second floor balcony and look down into like the foyer, and like you see this giant thing kind of lumbering around, and it notices you and it starts to walk closer to you. So you got to like try to complete an objective while exploring this house, while also trying to avoid this giant monster that's seemingly aiming to rip you limb from limb, like that kind of thing, where you're not in a maze. You're left to kind of explore and do your thing, but there is imminent danger constantly, within just mere feet of you. at all times.
No, I like that. I like the sort of intractable horror that like it's not moving fast or anything, but it's always there. And at some point,
Right.
if you don't find a way out, at some point it'll corner you.
Yeah. I think stuff like that is new ways of doing a haunted house that has yet to be done. I think in a really efficient way at the very least.
Yeah, Patrick, we were talking a little bit, offline when we were getting ready for this episode, and I know you have different opinions about types of haunted houses, but like what's your boundary of like what a haunted house should include? Because I know you were just mentioning, how somebody is like what the one guy you're mentioning is like just doing making people do extreme horrific stuff. That's really not a haunted house. So like, what's your line? Is it just the scares? Is it a certain amount of like monsters, certain amount of gore, certain amount of like what's your like balance?
As long as
between
any
all
of those
elements?
things is being done to service the purpose of the haunt, which is to scare people, I think it's more often than not okay. It really depends on, like, I would want to stray completely away from anything that has to do with politics. I don't know how that would really be worked into a haunt. Anything that touches base with currently sensitive topics, like if there's like a mass shooting, we're obviously not going to do anything that has anything to do with that. So like, if you're trying to keep things within the realm of a haunted house without obviously doing the best we can to keep from offending people, and just making sure it's as scary as possible and as fun as it can be within those guidelines. If a scene benefits from having just the room being like covered in blood, as gory as that is, if it works, it works. If it benefits the show, I don't want to do it just for the sake of doing it. It just would be a waste, and I think it would really take away from the effectiveness of the show overall.
Patrick, how scripted are these scenes in the haunted house? Are they? Is it more script? Is it more improv? Is it storyboarded? I mean, how do you work this?
So usually, at the beginning of a season, each actor is given their role, they're given their spot. Typically, they're meant to, let's say, if an actor's in a room, they're usually allowed to peek into the room before and after them, and then obviously work within their own room. And they're given like a vague script, usually like a character bio, just to kind of give them some inspiration of how to act in the room. At the beginning of the season, almost always, it starts off with people following their character bio to a T, usually. And then by the end of the season, people are just going willy-nilly and like ad-libbing everywhere and doing all kinds of wild stuff. Like, because, so like usually with a haunted house, like, and not to say that you don't ever want to go right at the start of the season, but haunted houses, for me, in my experience, usually really hit their stride halfway through the season, because actors are familiar with their roles, they're familiar with the environment, they know what to expect, they know where they can hide, what works best, what really works for them is usually figured out a week or two into the season.
Have you had people like let go because they're overperforming or underperforming their character?
That's a good question. That is really good.
People have been let go for underperforming. I don't want to be too mean, because a lot of these actors are young. I mean, typically you're not going to get people who are looking to be professional actors working in your haunted house. They're usually kids who just want to scare people. So usually they tend to have trouble following the rules, and then they can get themselves into trouble. I've been part of a show where an actor didn't really do anything wrong. They were being very intense, I guess, in defense of the person who was upset. But they didn't really do anything inherently wrong, but it did trigger them. They brought back some bad memories based on how the scene was going, and that person unfortunately had to be let go because of trying to please the customer and keep the haunt in good standings. And the actor understood. It was a sad moment, but it had to be done, unfortunately. It doesn't happen too often, but it does happen.
So I'm curious about like James and Joe as people who are not experts when it comes to haunted houses. Like, what is instead of having you design, unless you have an idea, in which case I want to hear it. But what's a scare or a haunt theme, or even just like a single scare that you would put in your haunted house?
Oh well, you know how my mind works. My greatest scare would be locked in Fenway Park for an entire baseball season, and the Yankees are losing every game to the friggin' Red Sox. And if they try to get out, all the pathways to the exits close, and there's baseballs flying at me, and there's all this people speaking with a Bostonian accent, torturing me about packing the cat and all that kind of stuff. It would just be
A lot of insight into Joe's nightmares here.
yeah, that would be something like that. It'd have to be a sports team. My haunted house. I really believe that. Yeah, something along with either baseball or the NFL football. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. What about you, James?
I don't think I've seen a haunted house that's themed after football and baseball.
Oh, that's why I said my demented mind works that way.
That would be interesting to see that though.
I don't know really, because I'm not a big as much as my brother does them and loves them. I'm not a big haunted house guy. I'm not like a big going in there and expecting to get scared. I kind of like all the behind the scenes and the building of the stuff, and I'm not so much for the walking through. I guess if you built it, I could walk through it, but so I don't know. I mean, for haunted house for me is like probably very traditional. Like Patrick and I were having a conversation about the different like ideas on haunted houses over time and what's more traditional. Like, I guess if I had to like design one and I was in charge of one, mine would probably just be a sort of a collection of different horrific creatures from like pop culture properties that I like. Like, you think you're walking through just like a museum of replicas, but every so often one of those creatures would not be a replica. It would be something that would actually reach out and grab you and something like that. So that's sort of like what I would do. And I would probably go through, like, I always, like I said, I was thinking about this for a while and realized while I'm creative, I don't have the same creativity in this arena that Patrick has, but I would probably go through like monsters of different eras, but from like my favorite Universal monsters all the way up to more modern creations. But like every so often one of those creatures would be an actor, or every so often and it would change different nights. I thought there'd be multiple suits, multiple actors, so everyone would get a different experience. Something like that. Chris, I don't know if that answers your question, Chris, but that's as much.
But there is a place for that kind of stuff still. Like haunted houses are getting more extreme as the years go on, but there is definitely still a place for more traditional haunted houses. One of the best ones I ever went to was just a simple basement haunted house. Kind of like cruddy plywood walls, black walls, and it was just like kids in costumes jumping out and trying to scare you, and it was fun. I mean, I wasn't scared, but I still had a blast doing it. People still really enjoy kind of recapturing that part of their childhood, going through those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would work. Like for me to like, if I had this kind of project, unlimited budget, unlimited money. Again, my creativity is not to go with something I don't know. Which I mean, my thing would be like, let's walk through the Evil Dead cabin. Like, let's do it. Let's do the whole thing. Build the cabin. Experience for me, but that's more of like an experience of like living part of a movie. And you
got to include the woods in that though too.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to drive out to it, or even like this. I mean, Joe might like this, but build a replica like Addams Family type of house and have the scares, but also have like some of the fun elements that you had in the movie with slides, like something like that, where you're like actually going through an environment that you're familiar with and experiencing what you've seen.
It's funny if we're talking unlimited budget though, and you mentioned Evil Dead, it's got to be something where you're in Sam Raimi's car. It only goes in groups of 4, and the second you cross the bridge closes up and curls up like in Evil Dead and closes you off from exiting. So like you have to continue forward into the haunt. Like now you're in it. You can't get out now.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm thinking like more like Hollywood experiences. I mean, which do give you scares, but I think Patrick, you're a little bit more creative than like. Not that what I'm saying is not creative. It's not uniquely creative.
No. But I mean, again, I think there's it's what Patrick was saying earlier about retooling haunts. You don't need to overhaul everything, but like change some things. It doesn't need to be everything. It doesn't need to be completely fresh year to year. It's just don't become predictable. And there are definitely, I'm sure, some haunts, some tricks, some scares that have hung around for as long as they have because they work, because they're effective. And like, yeah, you're going to get some repeat customers who are like, yeah, I saw that last year, but also, you're going to get some new customers too. So I think it's worth keeping in mind.
Right.
Like, you get some turnover year to year too. If it's good enough, people will travel for it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why some haunted houses have grown to have such a big name, is because people want to see it again and again and again every year.
Yeah, but have you? I don't know if you probably haven't been to it, but what are your, impressions of what they do at Universal Studios for their horror nights? Like,
Yeah, I mean, of the people I know who have gone, they've never said anything bad. It's always a positive experience, and like they have the tools to really go all out and have just insane costumes and special effects. And they did Aliens one year, and they had a whole house that had like this tentacle monster kind of weaving in and out through the house and stuff like that, and like crashing through walls. And that's just probably as close as you'll get to like an unlimited budget and being able to do like whatever you want.
Right.
Those kinds of untouchable by standard haunted houses.
I don't think we ever asked you this, but since we're doing this episode, what's the most elaborate and worth it haunted house you've ever been to, Patrick?
I'd have to say Darkness Rising. I think it's in Copeg. I believe they're a charity haunt, I think, if I'm remembering right. But their use of space, what they can do with that space in terms of building elaborate sets, and just like even just their creativity and using certain materials to build the kinds of environments that they want, are just consistently on like another level. Like there was one year I went, and it was based, I believe, on the Salem witch trials, and they built like this whole village inside this warehouse. They built like a forest out of like crumpled paper and like 2x4s, and it looked like you were walking into a forest. And the costumes in that room, not all that elaborate. It was just kids I don't know if they were kids, actors in like black morph suits with just red lights on their heads, for eyes. And every once in a while, the lights would like shut on, turn on and off as if they were blinking. And it was always timed with the lights in the room shutting off and turning back on. So like you'd see one scurry across the pathway, and then all of a sudden it's over on the other end of the room, or now it's by you. Like they're timed with lights and whatnot, and their actors were like so on par. It was just, it's always a good time. I've never had a bad experience with them. So like if I could recommend one, it's definitely Darkness Rising, for sure.
Sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's just a good time. They did a crash spaceship haunt one year, and it was funny. It wowed us. I mean, like we're walking down a hallway, and there's like a woman freaking out in like this lobby area in the hallway, and we got closer to her, and all of a sudden the lights only turned off for like a second, and then when the lights turned back on, she was gone. No sign of where she went, where she could have gone, but she was just not in the room anymore. And like that alone was like, that was such good timing, and it like set the tone for the rest of the night, and like it never disappoints. I would highly recommend going.
When you go to these, like when you go to haunted houses, like do you get scared, or do you like watch it like a magician watches another magician? You're looking for the tricks. You're looking to see how they did.
If an actor is able to scare me, and it happens every once in a while where I'll actually get startled, I always make sure to let them know. Like I'll stop and be like, dude, that was really good. Like you got me, and like I'll clap and stuff for like it happens so rarely, because if you work in haunted houses enough, you can't help but know what to look for. If you see like, it's kind of like in video games too. Like if you're looking at, walking down a hallway and all of a sudden the texture of the wall changes, you're like, someone's going to jump out from right there. If you see something that looks like a pad on the floor or like a light switch, you're like, oh, that's a sensor that's going to set off an electronic over there, like that kind of thing. So it's hard for me to get scared, but when it happens, it's amazing. It happens so rarely, but it's like such a treat when it happens. And I just love making sure that the actors know that they got me, because it can really be, it can either make or break an actor's night, being able to scare someone or not being able to scare someone. So to be able to like do that for someone is awesome.
See, but regardless of getting scared, though, you have a good time. Like, I guess you usually have a good
time.
Yeah,
I mean, if I'm not getting scared, I genuinely like just seeing what other haunts are doing. what they're building, how create, what are they doing with their resources, kind of thing. I mean, when I was still working on haunted house, it was also kind of like scoping out the competition, like what are they doing that we can do better, kind of thing. A lot of actors that go through haunted houses, haunt actors that go through haunted houses, they're oftentimes going and just admiring the sets and costumes, and sometimes it can be detrimental to the actors, so they don't always enjoy when that happens, because they want to scare people, and when like a group from another haunt goes through, they're like, I'm sure they can't help but feel like I'm kind of wasting my energy on you guys. It's kind of like, what's the point? But it can be hard for them at that point. But it's generally still fun for me and the people that go through.
Yeah, that's well, I guess it's a good question, because like I said, I really haven't been, like, the most haunted house that I've been to is like the Haunted Mansion at Disney. But Chris, have you been to a really good haunted house, like, that you can speak of?
No, I haven't been to a haunted house in a long time. Probably the most recent thing I did, and this would have been, gosh, this would have been pre-COVID, because we've got a number of haunted houses in St. Louis, and we just haven't gotten around to one. But probably the last thing I did that was similar to that was when we went to Universal, and there was a Walking Dead thing that Christina and I walked through, and it was good. It was entertaining. Like, it wasn't anything brilliant, but they had one or two of those red herring moments where it was like, oh, that wasn't too scary, and then somebody jumps at you from the other side. So that was fun, and of course the makeup was very good. So there was some good stuff there, but honestly, I haven't been through a lot of. We always talk about doing it, and then we sort of never prioritize it, And I think that's part of the thing is I didn't grow up going to haunted houses. That was the kind of thing that would scare me when I was younger, and I didn't like being scared. Now I like being scared. But since it was never like habit to go to a haunted house, we did that one. There was a fun little like haunted train. It was for kids that we brought Eli to. That would have been, I think, 2 years ago. Maybe it was last year. Over at Union Station here in St. Louis. And so there was a train they did up with like not too many like jump scares, but with creepy things. And I thought that was fun. Like being on a train would be pretty scary, when you're thinking about not having any place to go, and just being cramped, confined quarters. It was one of the things I liked about, gosh, the opening levels of Resident Evil Zero. You're on a train, and as you're moving through the different cars, people are either dying or the corpses are getting back up, and that was always like creepy in Resident Evil Zero. So I thought that'd be a fun thing. But no, a lot of it for me is I think it'd be fun to build the thing, which is another reason why like I wouldn't be good to build it, because I'm just spitballing a lot of time, But yeah, I liked the Walking Dead thing at Universal. The one that really sticks with me was, this would have been high school, so this would have been 2001, I think, when we were on a trip to England, a school trip to England, and I don't remember where this was, but we went through this thing that was supposed to be like a recreation of like the London fire, and it was a lot. Like there was a lot going on, and I remember there's this one. I don't think it was meant to be like terrifying, but like it was scary enough. And for me, one of the things that really got me, and I always stood in awe of the simplicity of it, is that this is after, because like the fire progresses as you get deeper into. I hesitate to call it a haunt because I don't know that it was, but it felt like that. But the deeper you get, the worse the fire gets, right? The more all-consuming it is, and so you walk into the space where there's smoke. It's hard to see. But there's fire and heat everywhere, and there's a lot of sound. And then down the hallway, down the quote street, right? You see a woman, and she's running, and it's just, I don't know how they managed it. I don't know if it was the fog or the fire or what, but she was on top of us before we knew it. She was like, somehow she got to right in front of us. We saw her coming the entire way, and a bunch of us still screamed, right? Like we saw her coming the entire time, but somehow she just got to us faster than we expected. She got a little closer than we expected, and she had makeup on that we couldn't see from a distance. And even that is something that always amazes me, is that like we could see it coming and it still scared us. I thought that was always so cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Right,
That is
right.
cool. I mean, Joe, have you done a haunted house that you can think of?
Yeah, back in the day in Coney Island, yeah, in the 70s, my friends and I would go down there and, walk around the park and go through the haunted houses and whatnot. But I don't remember too much of it. I was probably scared out of my wits because, it's not my cup of tea to be frightened like that. But yeah, that's maybe. I remember taking Stephen, my nephew Stephen, when he was about 10, someplace out here in Nassau County, with pumpkin picking, and it was a farm where you could buy produce, and they did have a haunt there, and we went through. And it was he was fine, I wasn't, but that might have been the last time. Yeah.
No, see, and I think that's the thing I like about these ideas is like, it's like Patrick was saying that they don't all have to be super high intensity, high acuity, get your heart racing kind of thing. Like I think there are different kinds of haunts that it can be really good and really effective. Like one of the books that I really, really enjoy, one of the horror books I really enjoy is called House of Leaves. Is anybody familiar with it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have it, and I haven't read it yet.
Okay. So what I'll say about House of Leaves, without offering any spoilers, this is something you can read on the back cover, is that it's the premise is pretty mundane, but it becomes horrifying in how it turns the mundane on its head, which is like there's a door that leads to a very, very little closet, and then the closet gets bigger, and then you open the door and like now suddenly it's a room, and then there are stairs in it that lead down, but like the outside isn't getting any bigger. It's just this weird extra dimensional space that is growing, and then they find out there's something in it, and it's like, yeah, there's nothing scary about a room unless the room doesn't make sense, right?
Right.
So like two of the ideas that I had that I would love to see done is one it would require plants. You need to have a couple of people in the group that are plants, and it would be a sort of like a spelunking haunt where people put on
Mm-hmm.
their harnesses and you've got rope and everything. But the couple of plants, the idea is that whatever is picking people off is doing it from above. And so the plants are the ones that have harnesses. These actors drop down from above and snatch up the plants, so that your group is left behind, terrified that you're going to be snatched up because you have the harness. It's possible that you'll be grabbed and snatched up, but of course you wouldn't. That's, I mean, liability, safety, all that stuff. But like this idea that I'm wearing the harness, what if they're not plants? What if they plan on snatching me up? But of course, that's also like can be really scary and really triggering for some people. Whereas, another idea I had was for anybody who's familiar with the so-called suicide forest in Japan. You
Yeah, I'm
know,
familiar with that.
yeah, like I think there's something that could be said for walking through what looks like an idyllic forest that has a very thick canopy that makes it darker in places, and everything you see from afar. And it would normally be a really nice and peaceful walk, but the things you think you see are really unsettling. So I don't know. I think there are different ways to do different haunts, different strokes for different folks, and all that. But like you were saying, Patrick, I think like I've never been into gore anyway, and the idea of just
Mm-hmm.
like this is how you, excuse me, up the level of your haunt is just to basically introduce torture porn, which I've never been a fan of, and I don't think is particularly creative, right? So like, I think there are other ways, more creative ways to do haunts, and not all of it has to be
Yeah,
terrifying. Some of it can really just be literally haunting. Like, no, I didn't scream, but man, I'm gonna have that image burned in my brain for a while.
100%. Yeah. I think honestly, sometimes simpler is better, and it can be, just as creepy, if not creepier, than a full blown monster following you through a haunt, just to see another human coming at you, and to the show be good enough to make you think that this person means to cause me harm is enough to frighten people.
Yeah,
It doesn't need
yeah.
to be an over the top creature.
Yeah, no, it is. No, you're right. It is. It's amazing because we know walking into this that we're safe, right? And then you're right for the atmosphere and the actor to really make you believe, like, oh no, this person is going to cause me harm. Like that requires an immense suspense of disbelief on behalf of the spectator. And a lot of people walking through haunted houses are like actively trying not to scream or actively trying not to freak out, or am I wrong about that, Patrick? Like, aren't there? It seems to me there are a lot of people who are like trying not to be scared. So, or do you think that that's probably not as accurate as I think it is?
Oh, 100%, without a doubt. And there's always, and more often than not, there's this memory I have, working at my old haunted house where there was a group going through, and it was one of those macho groups of dudes who were like, "We're not scared," and they would, act all tough and try to get in the actors' faces and stuff. And I remember this group of dudes got in this girl's face trying to tell her like, "You're not scary," and this and that, and like they're laughing, and they were entering an area of the haunt where me and my other friends had kind of worked it out where we would basically tag team the groups that would go through that room. So as groups passed a certain point, I would crouch down and just kind of like slowly creep behind them so they couldn't see me. And then my friend Nathan, who's a very tall man, would pop out from the corner and jump in front of them, and then they would get stuck there. And then before they know it, try to turn around, I'm already there. And then Nathan's gone. They go around the corner, and then I leap over the counter and get in front of them again. And like that quick succession of things jumping out at them almost always got them. And especially that.
Nice.
Oh my God, what's that? Like, because a lot of times, they people don't expect actors to be as agile sometimes or as energetic, in a haunted house. So when they see people just going literally all out and like bouncing off the walls and stuff like that, it freaks them out because it totally throws them off.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but more to your question though, yeah, there's always people who try to act tough and try to hold it in, but usually at least someone will catch them off guard and they'll get spooked. They're never going to be able to make it through without getting scared of it.
Well, Patrick, you have haunted houses lined up that you're going to be checking out this year. I mean, when we release this episode, it won't be Halloween itself. We'll still be in the middle of the season, so maybe I don't know if you have any recommendations or things that you're planning on for this coming year.
I'm going to check out Darkness Rising. I'm probably going to check out Gateway Haunted Playhouse. I'm going to try and see the show at Sands Point this year. Which, by the way, Sands Point, they really shouldn't be classified as a haunted house. It's more of a theatrical experience. It's not like walking through a maze and people jumping out at you. It's like you're going in and becoming part of the show. You're watching like little vignettes happen in front of you, and like you're more or less learning a story, and then by the end, you've got the conclusion, that kind of thing. So if anyone who is scared of going to haunted houses because they don't want to get too close to actors, they don't want to be touched, they don't want to be like over the top scared, Sands Point would definitely be the show for you if you want just like a cool experience. Yeah, those are the three that I'm probably going to check out.
Yeah, that's the Sands Point one. That's our mutual friend Jen and Sean, and you worked on last year's, right, or the year before?
I worked on that show for like the past few years. I think this year, I took a break and whatnot to just kind of have my October, but it's almost always a great show, and they really do put a ton of effort into giving everyone a great experience.
Well, the Pumpkin King needs a Halloween sometimes himself, right?
Yeah. It's been a while.
Well, plus you're busy as the audience. If you haven't gone back and this is your first time listening to Patrick, Patrick is also busy with his day job where he's building prop replicas and stuff. You're still busy with that full time, right?
Yep, still doing that. Still working on some cool stuff. Trying to keep stuttering on my words. Keep film history from just basically crumbling and falling apart. There is one more haunt idea.
Yeah,
just remembered. So
yeah, lay it on.
This is something I'm 100% sure I've never seen done before, and if it's been done, I've just never crossed my path. But to create a modular haunt that can be changed and altered as you're going through it.
Ooh.
Basically, meaning, so if you're going into, it can either be done as you're going through or, night to night, the whole orientation of the haunt can be changed. But basically each room or large sections of the haunt could be on giant caster wheels so that let's say you pass through one room, that room can now be taken out, moved, and put at the far end of the haunt, kind of thing. So like, you could be completely thrown off. The maze will change. You can be like, I've already been in this room. I think we went the wrong way. Like, no, we definitely haven't been turned around like that. Just to completely confuse people. There
Wow.
might not even be monsters in the maze. It's just trying to get through the maze before the maze changes.
That's a stellar idea. I love it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Or to even do something where like you're in the room and all of a sudden the room starts to change, move while you're in it, and all of a sudden your whole orientation has been changed. Like just spinning it 180, and now you truly are going back the way you came, kind of thing. Something like that would be amazing.
Well, if there's anybody listening with a lot of money and wants to build an ultimate haunted house, I think you have some ideas. I mean, Patrick's here and he's ready. He's ready. Well, maybe not for this year, but for next year, right?
Yeah. Just contact me and we'll make something happen.
Well, this is awesome, Patrick. I think we should do recommendations. We haven't. I don't think we should do some recommendations. I don't know if anyone would have Halloween recommendations. Patrick, I know this is putting you on the spot, but do you have any Halloween themed recommendations for our audience to check out during the season?
You mean just
activities,
like activities
books,
to do
movies, things that you would recommend that would help people celebrate Halloween?
It's funny for someone who loves Halloween as much. I don't have a ton of really creative ideas. I mean, I have my own traditions that Caitlin and I do every year. We try to always carve pumpkins. We'll watch Nightmare Before Christmas, or we'll watch Over the Garden Wall, which if you guys haven't seen it, or anyone listening hasn't watched it yet, please do. It's an amazing, short cartoon. And then just try to hit up some haunted houses. It's been such a huge part of my life for so many years. So we just try to stay in the spirit and check them out when we can.
Sounds great. Chris or Joe, you have any I guess seasonal recommendations you'd like to put forward?
I have a movie and a TV show. Yeah. The movie is Whole Lot Ghost, 1941, Abbott and Costello.
Always a good call.
And you talked, Patrick, about room changing. Well, there's an incredible scene in that film. Lou is getting ready to go to sleep, and he hangs his pants up on a whole tree, and it triggers a mechanism, and the entire room turns into a casino, and he just freaks out because the haunted house was basically a speakeasy that they inherited from Moose Matson, a crime boss. So it's a great movie. It's one of the best. And for TV, I'm thinking of my favorite haunted house on TV is located at 1313 Mockingbird Lane, home of Herman and Lily Munster. And, you got Spot the dragon that lives under the staircase. You got the raven in the clock that's always ragging on Herman. And you got Grandpa has a dungeon down below. So it's a great show. I've enjoyed that since I was a kid. And I think we got some comic books, James. Hopefully they're on a non-sponsor.
Sure. I mean, hopefully. What do you want to? I'll check. What are you recommending?
Well, I'm recommending Secrets of the Haunted House. It was 46 issues, I believe it ran. Of course, House of Secrets, the book that spawned Swamp Thing. House of Mystery, and DC even ran from 1961 to 1987. They ran a series in GI Combat called The Haunted Tank, which is a really cool series. So it's kind of like a war horror comic. And DC also had a comic book called Weird War also. So
excellent, Joe. I think only like maybe the modern day House of Secrets is on there, but if you got the DC Unlimited app where you have access to old time trades, you could pick those up too.
Yeah, highly recommend them. Yeah, great Neil Adams covers on those books, by the way.
Chris, you have any seasonal recommendations?
Sure. I mean, I'm always going to recommend Aliens. I will say that based on what we've talked about today, I would suggest The Forest. I don't think it's anything brilliant, but it is creepy and it's interesting. And again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about this forest in Japan that's known as the Suicide Forest. This woman learns that her sister has gone missing there, and so she decides to go and find her in the forest. So I enjoyed it. It was creepy. I liked the suspense it built. It was one that I enjoyed. So The Forest. I don't know if it was definitely streaming because I didn't buy it or anything, but I can't tell you offhand where. It looks like you can. It says watch on Prime Video, rent or buy for $3.99. At the time I watched it, it must have been free, but maybe it's streaming somewhere else. So The Forest, I mentioned Aliens. I always watch The Thing. And then reading, I'll go back to what I was mentioning earlier. I'll say House of Leaves was a really creepy and enjoyable read. And then last October, I did read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. A friend recommended it to me and actually gave me a copy, and I read it and I liked it. So those are some of my seasonal recommendations.
Excellent, Chris.
Cool. Very good.
Well, I'm with Patrick. I'll recommend The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's a season. It's a good way to transition the seasons. So I recommend that. Chris, I'm with you with Aliens. I'm with you with watching The Thing. And I actually just watched the movie Brightburn that came out a few years ago, which is a
Oh,
is
sure.
a
Yeah,
horror
yeah,
movie
yeah.
about basically what if Superman was evil. It was a good movie. There is
Mm-hmm.
some gore in it, selectively used, but it is there for some of the I would say the more intense or kill scenes. But I thought it was well done. It was a low budget movie. It's produced by James Gunn. You know, if you want some superhero horror, go check that out. So, well, Patrick, thank you for being on this part of the Halloween show. We always enjoy having you, and this was really fun to dig into to everything you talked about. So thank you for coming out of your crypt once again.
Of course, it was a pleasure.
And of course, I could not do it without my other two co-hosts. So thank you, Joe.
You're welcome, James, and thank you, Patrick. I'm not sleeping tonight, or I will sleep with the lights on.
And of course, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, no, my pleasure to be here. Thanks for playing along, Patrick. Appreciate you as always.
Anytime.
And listening audience, as always, if you have thoughts about the things we've talked about or your own ideas for what would be a good scary haunted house, we'd love to hear them in the comments section on the Facebook page, so you can put them there. You could follow us and look for us on Instagram. And if you wanted to email us directly, secretoriginsmc@gmail.com. We thank you for listening, and we will talk to you on the next spooktacular episode.